Today, the conversation is loud and polarized. Is the United States losing its technological lead? Is China surpassing the West in artificial intelligence? Can Europe or India or someone else form the next pole of innovation? But step back. Look not at headlines, but at patterns, because the pattern is older than silicon chips or data centers. It starts with steam. Britain in the 1800s was not just an empire of colonies and trade. It was the world's first technological superpower, a society that fused energy, engineering, finance, and ideology into a self-reinforcing machine. The steam engine was not just a machine. The railroad was not just transportation. They were the new nervous system of the world, compressing time, collapsing distance, restructuring economies, rewriting identity. People in London truly believed they were living inside the pinnacle of civilization. Then, over decades, but faster than anyone expected, another center rose. The United States took the logic of industrialization and scaled it beyond what cramped island cities could manage. Oil, steel, electricity, telephones, highways, aerospace, computers, microchips. The United States didn't just innovate. It built the architecture for a global order, supply chains, capital markets, research institutions, entertainment media, ideology. It believed deeply that its model was final, that the future would speak English, use American software, watch American movies, adopt American norms. Then, again, another center rose. China did not copy blindly. It studied, observed, absorbed. It took the architecture of the modern industrial and digital economy and rebuilt it at unprecedented scale and speed. It fused state coordination with market dynamism. It fused population scale with manufacturing mastery. And now, at the frontier of artificial intelligence, semiconductor ambition, cyber-physical systems, and state-level algorithmic coordination, we are watching a new technological center of gravity emerge. Britain had steam and rails. The United States had silicon and software. China now moves with AI and integrated national industrial strategy. This is not about who is better. It is about how the center of innovation moves, from one hub of energy, ambition, and organizational capacity to another. And every time, the previous superpower narrates itself as eternal, until suddenly it isn't. Yet individuals inside these shifts don't experience them as charts or strategy reports. They experience them as an identity, as anxiety, as pride, as a loss, as an opportunity. You might already feel this shift, whether or not you can name it. Something in the air, something in the headlines, something in the tone of political speech, something in the way young people dream differently than their parents. This story is about that feeling. Hold it for a moment. And as we continue forward, just notice. Notice the emotional tremors under the historical facts. Notice how patterns echo. Notice what this might suggest about your own future, your work, your identity. Keep listening. The pattern is about to get clearer. To understand how the first global tech superpower emerged, imagine Britain in the late 1700s and early 1800s. A small island with damp skies and crowded towns, but brimming with restless minds. Everything felt constrained. By land, by distance, by muscle power. Work was slow, travel was slow, knowledge moved slowly, carried in letters and ships across unpredictable seas. And then, something astonishing changed. The steam engine, at first a crude pumping device in dark coal mines, evolved into a universal transformer. Suddenly, muscle could be replaced with machine strength. Horses and human backs no longer defined the limits of what could be built, moved, or produced. Steam turned coal into motion, heat into industry, and industry into empire. The railroad followed soon, tracks of iron that stretched across Britain's rolling hills like veins carrying energy through a living organism. A journey that once took days now took hours. Goods that once cost fortunes to ship now arrived cheaply and quickly. Ideas that once stayed local began to spread with extraordinary velocity. This was not just infrastructure, it was a psychological acceleration. Imagine being alive then, watching your world compress, watching familiar rhythms vanish, watching wealth concentrate in cities that used to be insignificant villages. There was excitement, but also fear. New machines replaced old crafts. Traditional communities were uprooted. People struggled to adjust to the speed, the noise, the smoke, the newness of it all. And yet, Britain believed, we are the future. We have cracked the code. We have unlocked the formula for economic destiny. The British elite didn't just produce technology. They produced narratives to justify it. Progress is ours. Industry is our identity. Other nations will follow our path, our system, our leadership. Factories were not only buildings. They were symbols of world order. Railroads were not only transportation. They were proof of superiority. Britain used its technological lead to shape global finance, trade networks, and even cultural imagination. Maps redrew themselves to reflect British influence, the world literally colored in red. But here is where the pattern begins to reveal itself more clearly. The moment a civilization believes its system is final, that is the moment its model begins being observed and replicated elsewhere. Because technology leaks, knowledge migrates, ambition travels. Students study abroad, engineers defect, traders carry both goods and ideas. Power, ironically, creates the conditions for someone else to overtake it. And so, across the Atlantic, in a land vast and underdeveloped, the seeds of a new technological center were being planted. The United States did not invent the steam engine. It did not invent the railroad, but it saw their potential at scale. That is the key. Britain optimized. America multiplied. America looked at the logic of industrialization and thought, what if everything were scaled not for one island, but for a continent, and then for the world? This is how technological power shifts, not through sudden war or collapse, but through the next player taking the same tools and building bigger, faster, more ambitiously. People in Britain didn't feel the shift at first. They were too busy celebrating railway expansions, trade deals, scientific societies, imperial exhibitions. They were proud, and understandable so. They had changed the world. But the very success that made Britain powerful made its model visible, transferable, reproducible. This is how superpowers unintentionally mentor their replacements. It's not personal, it's structural. It's the nature of innovation. And as Britain hit the limits of geography, population size, and resource strain, America rose with seemingly infinite room to grow. But before we jump ahead to the United States, and later to China, we pause here for one quiet human truth. People living through Britain's peak did not know they were in a peak. Most thought it was permanent. Most believed the future would look like the present, simply expanded. This is the emotional trap every leading superpower falls into. A soft CTA emerges here. Not for debate, but reflection. If you live in a nation that believes its dominance is natural or eternal, ask yourself gently, have you seen this pattern before? Because we are now moving toward the second turning of this story, and it accelerates. The United States did not begin as a technological empire. It began as a frontier, raw land, rough opportunity, fractured identity. But what it had was scale, and scale is destiny. In the late 1800s and early 1900s, America took Britain's industrial blueprint and applied it to a landscape with nearly limitless room to build. Railroads didn't just connect cities. They stitched together identity, economy, and imagination. Steel mills rose like cathedrals of the new era. Oil fields burned as symbols of power. Waves of immigrants arrived carrying labor, hunger, and dreams. America wasn't refined, it was explosive. It believed in the bigger, the faster, the newer. And then came electricity, telephones, aviation, technologies that accelerated society at a pace that made even Britain gasp. But the shift that truly moved global technological leadership from Britain to the United States wasn't just about infrastructure. It was about computation. Silicon became America's steam engine. The microchip was America's railroad. What coal was to Victorian Britain, code became to American modernity. It started quietly, in labs and small garages, often funded by military budgets and Cold War urgency. The United States framed technological progress as survival, as security, as national identity. Universities, corporations, the government, and private capital aligned in a unique synergy. Innovation became a cultural value, not just an industry segment. The valley was not inevitable, it was cultivated. It was the product of competition, ideology, immigration, experimentation, and, most importantly, belief. That American belief, we can build the future, had gravitational pull. It drew the smartest minds from every continent. A Jewish mathematician fleeing European terror, a Chinese scientist seeking academic freedom, an Indian engineer chasing an opportunity, a Russian physicist escaping political constraints. America did not simply invent technology. It aggregated talent and energy from the world and focused it into a single technological engine. And then it scaled it. Silicon chips became computers. Computers became networks. Networks became the internet. The internet became a global nervous system. And Silicon Valley became, for a time, the beating heart of the future. The United States didn't just lead technologically. It shaped how humans thought, communicated, worked, learned, and even loved. American companies became the platforms through which the world understood itself. Google became a memory. Facebook became a community. Amazon became logistics. Apple became an identity. Netflix became a narrative. Tesla became a prophecy. This was cultural power, stacked on top of technological power, stacked on top of financial power. A civilization that believed its innovation was destiny. And for a while it was. But here's the pattern. Just as Britain looked at steam and believed it had found a final formula, America looked at silicon and assumed the future would always speak its language. The software gospel spread fast. Open markets, free trade, venture capital, flexible labor, individual creativity. It worked beautifully until others learned to read the code. Globalization did not just export products. It exported knowledge. America taught the world how to build supply chains, how to design chips, how to scale factories, how to optimize research institutions, and how to commercialize technology. And just like Britain unintentionally taught America, America unintentionally taught China. There's an emotional layer here that's easy to miss. If you grew up in the US during its technological golden age, innovation felt like breathing. Progress felt inevitable. The world felt shaped around you. There was no rival, no challenger, no question. And now, suddenly, there is. Which brings us to the next phase in the cycle. But before we move forward, pause here. Notice what this story is doing inside you. If you feel pride, that's natural. If you feel discomfort, that's natural. If you feel curiosity, that's the point. The goal is not to choose a side. The goal is to understand the movement of history from the inside, because now the torch is being contested. The era of uncontested American technological dominance has ended, not because America failed, but because the world learned. And now we turn to China, the next center of gravity, the new ideological battleground. The unfolding chapter of artificial intelligence as infrastructure, identity, and power. China's rise is often told as a story of copying, scale, or manufacturing, but that narrative misses the deeper truth. China did not merely adopt American technology, it studied the architecture of American technological power, research ecosystems, industrial clusters, capital incentives, talent pipelines, digital infrastructure, and then reorganized them for a nation of over 1 billion people. This is what makes China not just large, but structurally different. Where the United States built innovation from decentralized experimentation, China built innovation from centralized direction combined with competitive internal markets. It fused state strategy with entrepreneurial hunger. It aligned national goals with industrial planning while still allowing ruthless competition among private companies. And it built the physical backbone, the factories, the ports, the power grids, the data centers, at a speed the world had never seen before. If America's power peaked with the birth of Silicon Valley, China's ascension began with something quieter, the decision to make manufacturing the foundation of national identity, not as cheap labor, not as outsourced production, but as mastery. To build chips, you must first build machines that build the machines. To build AI, you must first build the compute infrastructure where AI can live. China understood that control of manufacturing is control of reality. And so, as American tech companies shifted towards software-first, asset-light strategies, China invested in factories, supply chains, robotics, energy grids, ports, satellites, rare earth extraction, and semiconductor tooling. The West told itself that manufacturing no longer mattered. China listened and built. Then came the smartphone era. Suddenly, China was not just the world's workshop. It was the world's user base. 1 billion people networking, purchasing, banking, messaging, consuming, generating data at scale no Western platform had ever seen. Data became China's oil. Algorithms became its engines. Domestic companies like Tencent, Alibaba, ByteDance, and Huawei began to operate not as imitators, but as laboratories, optimizing for scale, behavioral insight, and integrated digital ecosystems. While Western apps were standalone services, Chinese apps became operating systems for life. Banking, socializing, renting, investing, transportation, shopping, entertainment, integrated into seamless digital experiences. And once daily life became data, the leap to artificial intelligence was not a leap. It was a continuation. AI did not appear in China as a Silicon Valley export. It appeared as an inevitability in a society already comfortable with automation and digital mediation. And the state recognized something sooner than much of the West. AI is not a tool. AI is infrastructure. It is not just an industry. It is the foundation upon which future economic, military, social, and cultural power will be built. So China did what Britain did with railways and what America did with microchips. It made AI strategic. It centralized investment. It created national labs. It aligned universities, cloud providers, telecom giants, military institutions, and local governments. It linked AI to governance, logistics, healthcare, surveillance, transportation, and industrial control. Meanwhile, the West debated. The West hesitated. The West asked, should we? China asked, how fast? And now we stand in a moment where the global technological center is not moving away from the United States, nor toward China, but into a contested duality. Two technological civilizations running parallel, each believing its system is the future. One built on open research, private capital, and creative decentralization. One built on coordinated industrial alignment, infrastructural ambition, and population scale data feedback. Each model has strengths, each model has vulnerabilities, and this is where the emotional undercurrent appears again. For people in the West, China's rise feels like disruption. For people in China, it feels like restoration. For people everywhere else, it feels like a choice. A soft CTA here. Notice how your own background shapes your instinctive reaction to this narrative. That reaction is your conditioning speaking, not truth. Conditioning. History is not asking you to choose sides. History is asking you to recognize the pattern so you are not surprised when it completes its next turn. The cycle is not finished. We are entering the AI century, and the question is no longer who invented the technology. The question is, who will integrate it into the deepest layers of society? That is where the next superpower will be defined. We are now living in the hinge moment of this cycle, a moment where the world is beginning to sense that something enormous is shifting beneath the surface, even if the language to describe it still feels incomplete. You can feel it in political speeches trying to defend a status quo that no longer exists. You can feel it in corporate strategies that increasingly sound like improvisation. You can feel it in universities scrambling to redefine what knowledge even means when information is no longer scarce but overflowing. You can feel it in the tension between optimism and fatigue. Something is changing. And the change is not about which country makes the fastest chips or trains the biggest models. It is about identity. In the STEAM age, societies redefine themselves around machines and factories. In the Silicon Age, societies redefine themselves around computers and global networks. In the AI age, societies will redefine themselves around systems that think. This is not an upgrade. This is a transition in how power is organized. The old model, individual expertise, institutional hierarchy, stable professions, is dissolving. The new model, adaptive intelligence, automated decision-making, synthetic creativity, is emerging. And every individual, every company, every nation is now in silent negotiation with this shift. Will AI be a partner, a tool, a ruler, a mirror, a ghost? The answer will differ depending on where you stand. In the United States, AI is being framed as an entrepreneurial opportunity, something to build businesses with, something to experiment with, something to disrupt old systems. It is innovation as identity. In China, AI is being framed as national destiny, infrastructure to secure stability, competitiveness, and long-term civilizational continuity. It is cohesion as identity. And in the rest of the world, AI is arriving as both promise and threat, empowerment and erosion, opening and uncertainty. But here's the key. The pattern does not end with geopolitics. The pattern continues inside the human psyche. Every technological superpower cycle forces a reshaping of what it means to be a person. In Britain's steam age, people had to adapt to urban life, mechanized labor, and the loss of agrarian certainty. In America's Silicon Age, people had to adapt to digital mediation, hyperconnected identity, and the collapse of geographic boundaries. In China, SAI age, and the global AI age that echoes from it, people will have to adapt to something even more intimate, the blurring of the boundary between internal thought and external assistance. When tools begin to think with you, when creativity becomes a shared space between human intuition and synthetic suggestion, when memory is outsourced to cloud systems and decision-making is guided by predictive inference, the question becomes not, what can I do, but what remains uniquely mine? This is where the story becomes emotional. Because every technological shift rewrites the center of meaning. In Britain, meaning moved from land to labor. In America, meaning moved from labor to self-expression. In China's AI century, meaning may move from self-expression to co-evolution, the ability to navigate a hybrid identity where human and machine intelligence are entwined. And you, listening to this story, living in this moment, are experiencing the disorientation that comes whenever the world rewrites what it means to be human. Some feel excitement, a sense of infinite creative leverage. Some feel grief, an uneasy awareness that something familiar is fading. Some feel threatened, fear that autonomy is dissolving. And some feel awakening, recognition that identity has always been fluid, adaptive, emergent. A soft midpoint CTA belongs here, and it is simple. Don't rush to conclude what this means. Just notice what you feel. Notice the friction. Notice the curiosity. Notice the resistance. That emotional texture is the real historical archive. We are all inside the transition. And the next section will go deeper, not into economics or geopolitics, but into the human condition of living through a technological shift that does not ask for permission, only response. The cycle continues, but the future is not decided. Not yet. Let's slow the camera down now. We've moved through history in broad strokes: steam, silicon, AI, empires rising, empires aging, new powers forming. But the real hinge point of this story is not in parliaments, boardrooms, or labs. It is in the human interior, what it feels like to live during a turning of the age. Because for individuals, these transitions don't appear as headlines like the rise of X or the decline of Y. They show up as subtle changes in daily experience. A job that once felt stable suddenly feels uncertain. A system of belief that once felt logical starts to feel outdated. A sense of identity that once felt anchored starts to loosen. People describe it as the world accelerating, or everything is getting louder, or I feel like I'm behind no matter how hard I work. But what they're really feeling is a structural shift. When Britain industrialized, individuals felt uprooted. leaving farms for factories, villages for cities. When America digitized, individuals felt dislocated, leaving physical communities for networks, continuity for constant change. Now, in the AI turning, the internal dislocation is more subtle and more intimate. The distance between thought and action is collapsing. The boundary between private mind and external capability is thinning. We are learning, for the first time, to share cognition. And this changes the emotional landscape of being human. If a machine can write music, what does it mean to be a composer? If a model can diagnose illnesses, what does it mean to be a doctor? If algorithms can guide investment, forecast risk, summarize knowledge, generate design, produce art, what is the role of the human in creation? This is where old models of self-worth start to feel fragile. For centuries, society told people, you are what you do. Your skill, your trade, your knowledge, your craft. This is your identity. But when technology begins to do many of those things faster, cheaper, or more consistently, the foundation of identity shifts. And that shift is emotionally difficult, not because humans become obsolete, that is a shallow fear, but because the narrative of self must evolve. Consider this quietly. Perhaps the defining human ability was never labor, knowledge, or production. Perhaps the defining human ability has always been meaning-making, interpretation, choice, vision, desire, the ability to imagine futures, not just compute outcomes, the ability to decide what matters. Machines can analyze, machines can generate, machines can optimize. But meaning, real meaning, comes from experience, from emotion, from the invisible architecture of memory, longing, attachment, intuition. The future is not human or machine. The future is human with machine, co-evolution. But that requires a new emotional skill, the ability to let go of identity structures that were built for a different technological era. You're not your efficiency. You're not your profession. You're not your productivity metrics. You're not your resume. You're the awareness behind all of that, the one who chooses, interprets, relates, imagines. In Britain's STEAM age, the emotional challenge was learning to survive dislocation. In America's Silicon Age, the emotional challenge was learning to survive overstimulation. In the AI age, the emotional challenge will be learning to survive fluidity, to let identity stretch and adapt, as thinking becomes a shared process between human intuition and synthetic cognition. And this is where we circle back to the original pattern. Every global tech superpower cycle has two layers: the visible layer, machines, infrastructure, capital, innovation, and the invisible layer, the emotional adaptation of the population living through it. Britain's emotional adaptation was discipline. America's emotional adaptation was individuality. China's emotional adaptation is synthesis, collective orientation with adaptive integration. But you, wherever you live, are now tasked with a personal adaptation, understanding that intelligence is no longer something you have, but something you interface with, and your value is not disappearing. It is evolving. The world is not becoming less human. It is becoming differently human, and that is where the story turns toward possibility. Soft CTA here. Before we step into vision, take a breath. You're not late. You're not behind. You're not being replaced. You're entering the part of history where the role of the individual is being rewritten. We will explore what that role becomes next. So here we stand, between ages, between identities, between worlds. The British believed steam had revealed the future. The Americans believed silicon had completed it. Now China believes AI will define it. And yet the truth is simpler and deeper than any flag or system. Every era believes it has discovered the final shape of human progress, and every era is proven temporary, not because it fails, but because success produces imitation, and imitation produces transformation. Power never disappears. It migrates. Innovation never ends. It evolves. And humanity never stops reshaping itself in response. The question is not which nation will win the century. The question is who will understand the century while they are living in it. Because awareness, not technology, is the real competitive advantage of transitions like these. If you recognize the pattern while others cling to familiar myths, you are already further ahead than you think. If you can see identity as flexible rather than fixed, if you can see technology as extension rather than threat, if you can see society as fluid rather than static, then you can move through the world with less fear and more agency. The future will not belong to the loudest nations, nor the richest corporations, nor the most advanced machines. It will belong to those who can hold complexity without collapsing into panic, those who can adapt their sense of self without needing to cling to what once defined them, those who can participate in co-creation instead of defending the past. This is the emotional intelligence of the AI century, not just how to use tools, but how to stay human while everything around you accelerates. And the truth is, humanity has done this before. When the first trains reshaped time, people feared the death of nature and meaning. When the first telegraphs collapsed in distance, people feared that communication would lose depth. When the first factories replaced artisans, people feared the soul would be mechanized. Every era believed it was losing something essential, and every era discovered something new about itself. The age of AI will be no different. But we will have to learn something Britain and America struggled with near their peaks: humility in the face of change. The humility to say the world is shifting and that does not have to be lost. The humility to say identity can expand. The humility to say meaning is not tied to the tools we use, but to the awareness with which we use them. You are not here to compete with machines. You are here to collaborate with them. You're not here to defend your past identity. You are here to grow into the next one. And you're not here to choose which civilization is the right one. You are here to learn from each. Britain's discipline, America's imagination, China's scale and synthesis. The world ahead will not be dominated by one. It will be shaped by all. But one more layer matters, the personal one. You will have to decide something privately, quietly, without applause. Will you resist the future out of fear, or step into it with curiosity? Will you mourn the fading of old certainties, or learn to navigate new freedoms? Will you let the acceleration of history overwhelm you, or will you let it wake you? A soft, near-ending CTA belongs here. If this story stirred something, confusion, clarity, tension, wonder, do not rush to resolve it. Sit with it. Let the questions work on you. Because awareness gained in transition becomes identity gained in the future. And now we close not with an answer, but with an opening. The next global superpower may not be a country at all. It may be a way of thinking, a civilization of the mind rather than land, a network of people across borders who understand the pattern, adapt to the shift, and co-create what comes next. You are not just watching history, you are inside it. The future is not arriving. You are already living in its first draft. And your role has not been written yet. The pen is in your hand. If you want the next chapter, how individuals, not nations, become the true power centers of the AI era, say one word: continue.